Welcome back to another episode of 1,000 Fans Podcast. I'm Jay.
Sein.
So today we're going to be talking about building a team versus independence. So my thing when I kind of pitched this episode, it was exploring that journey of like artistry where you start to think and realize that you need other people. I think we need to start off by clarifying team. Like I think that when we're talking about the notion of team, there's this perception of your team has to be people who are working with you full time, doing everything. And like that just doesn't make sense until you're in a cash generative place where you can afford to pay somebody an hourly rate to do the things that you need. So for me, before I throw it to you, I think team is just finding people who are invested in your career, or even if it's not invested in your career, invested in like you as a person, or they see what you're trying to do and like getting them involved with what their skills and their talents are. So like, you know, I think before I started working with like people like yourself and other people in the team, like I used to think, I'm a videographer, I should shoot everything myself. But it's like, how the hell am I going to be behind the camera and in front of it? Or why am I like stressing about the direction of a video when actually if you're a videographer and I give you the camera, you're going to bring your own lens to something and it helps elevate the project. And it's like relinquishing that need for control of something that at that time wasn't generating enough for anyone to warrant to steal it.
Yeah, that's a bar. For me, it's the first fundamental question which I pitch to everyone in the room is like, how conscious do you have to be about like what type of team are you building? Is it a football team where you need 11 people actively doing exactly what they need to do? Like you said, people who are being paid to be left back, people who are paid to be in certain positions, or are you a tennis player who, we all know a tennis player doesn't end up at Wimbledon on their own. So it's like, are you the player who needs all of those other people, the 4 people sat on the front row who are shouting coaching tips and tricks to you? And like, what type of team do you think of when you're talking about like building a team?
I think for me, it was like building a team of people around me who get the vision of the projects I'm working on and are willing to kind of help in some of the forms or areas that I maybe struggle in. So like, for example, I'm quite socially awkward. I hate like, you man knowing it, but like the people at home don't know this. So like going to shows and then having to like, well, not worry, but like just deal with like meeting like new promoters and stuff like that, having people on your team who are there to like run sound check. So I don't have to deal with that. I can literally just hang around with the band and who I feel comfortable with and get into the space where I need to be without having to kind of deal with that weirdness of trying to figure out whether this sound guy is my friend or not, or whether this promoter is my friend or not. But also like having people in your team that are part of the vision in the sense of where they can uplift skills that you don't have. So like, I'm a good videographer when I'm focusing 100% on videography. But if I'm focusing on my performance and if I'm focusing on songwriting, then I'll become a videographer that's at 25% rather than 100%. And it's like, well, actually, my lens that I choose to articulate the world I live in is via the lens of music primarily rather than videography. So why would I then, even though I have those skills, not look for someone that's my brethren who views their life primarily through photography and videography? You're only going to elevate the way in which that's captured by working together. And so that's my thing. It's like bringing in people who enhance the project or working with people who get what I'm trying to do. Like, what's your approach to it?
Yeah, no, that makes sense because for me, the whole experience took my own photography and videography to places that I never expected that I would be able to look back at something that I've done in that way. In the, like, very recently, off topic, but I'll steer back on track. Very recently I found a printer who will print some like really high quality, high finish pictures that I've taken. And I got like a sample of 5 of them in the post that arrived just in like the big brown envelope, do not bend thing, arrived in the post, and I looked at those pictures and I just like laid them out on the table, and I was like, if I didn't know that I took these, I would have expected someone who did a whole lot of their 10,000 hours to have taken some of these pictures. And like there was some I was looking at them that like, as objective as I can be, being the person that took the picture, objectively, I understand this cohesive piece of art in front of me. And that gassed me up. And that was the point in which, again, 4 of those 5 pictures were from the Jamaica trip.
Yeah. Was one the dude with the shirt off?
Yeah,
Okay.
there was that guy.
Yeah.
That's one of the pictures which, like, it's imprinted in my head. And I haven't done anything with them yet. And that was just like the first draft. And now it helps me understand, again, parts of the creative journey that I would have never understood if I wasn't pairing it with that other perspective and watching you like climb that ladder and that trajectory and then going like, I completely align with the message, and in the creative way that the world works, that's the same message that I would love to be able to capture. And because then that's mine, like visually, this is what this represents. And for me, that's such a unique way in which, yeah, like our 2 paths have made it so from my own perspective, I can look back at my pictures like that and people come into the house and they might be out again. Because every now and then I'll just put them on the table to go, has my idea on editing changed? Has my preference or taste gone, oh, actually, they were too glossy. Everyone went through that era on Instagram where our pictures were deep fried. Everyone went through that. But now we look back and you can look at those pictures like, why is it so orange? Why is it so, like all of those, why is it so high contrast? Why is every line thick black? Like being able to just take, like that's an example of just looking back. And I've shown people like snippets of the videos or pictures that have come from that. The album cover, I've shown people those things and been like, at that time, that was just me doing my 10,000 hours in that opportunity that you built as part of the team.
I don't even remember you taking the album cover photo. I have no idea where you, I know that it'd be on the balcony of where we stayed, but I have no idea when you took that picture.
Yeah.
With some of the imagery I can pinpoint, but that I literally can't.
Yeah, and that was me being like, we are in, like you were fully invested in creating, you were doing all of the mental gymnastics that morning of like, we're gonna have to, like the output's gonna be high. And I could see you doing all the maths. And I was just like out here fiddling with cameras and setting stuff up. And then you just stood and it was probably might have been not even halfway through the trip, but it was a morning where you came down and it was a bit cloudy in the morning and you just stood, and I can't remember what we were doing that day. But it was like day 2 or 3. I can't remember what you were doing, but you were like mentally going through it. And that was the first time I saw you, like your shoulders dropped. Like it was a lot that was coming and a lot that you were prepping for, but there was like no stress or tension in it. Like you looked so relaxed, but your brain was 1,000 miles an hour. And I was like, that is probably, that's setting him up for that. Like he's going to fly into wherever's about to come today. That was like, we can walk into studios. And I was just like, that is a moment. And I was just like with my camera and the 10,000 hours caught, and it was just like, boom, I've caught that. So you're just chilling, you're resting, head's down, your hair's long. Yeah. And it's just like, that was the moment that, like one of those milestones in like a team doing team shit.
And that moment right there, without you being there, that moment will not be captured. You know, trying to do that as an independent, like just as this solo, you have to set up a camera and then you're facing out there and then putting that on the timer and then it snaps. Yeah. And then you go check it, like, I don't like that.
And you're conscious about all.
You're just conscious about things, and you don't get that moment. You can't ever get that moment. You can never replicate that. So like I said, yeah, definitely having that team and just being able to collaborate with your team member, you know, double checking, is this sound good or is this direction I'm going good? You know, it just...
One of my litmus tests in the studio session was looking at you and Simeon to see whether your heads were moving.
Yeah. That's...
Like I knew, like when I was writing for one of the songs with Boxy, which was the first song we did that day, I was literally writing and mumbling my cadence, and I looked and Sein was nodding, And then he was picking up words in the bar and singing it as I was rapping it. And I was like, all right, I'm onto it when I hear. Like, it's even that you don't get with a team. I think, like, they don't get without a team, sorry. I think, like, the anti-team rhetoric comes from, I guess, firstly, people just not being in a space where it makes sense to bring people on. That's something that we need to be honest about. But also, I think sometimes there's this thing, particularly with, like, in rap and hip hop, it's like, you know, the entrepreneurial sense of, well, I do everything myself. I shoot my videos, I produce my beats, and I do that. And it's like, well, your music and your output looks and sounds like you do.
Yeah.
You, like, respectfully bring, like, people
Find
along.
people, yeah.
Like, people can help elevate your shit because they're stood, like that analogy. Like, if I'm in my head writing, preparing to go into a session, I'm then not going to be able to step outside of that to think about how I'm appearing on frame. The prerequisite of building team is just being around people. I think that there's a lot of like forced networking now. It's like your network is your net worth. Everyone's like, yeah, go to these networking events, meet these different people.
Makes me tense. Your network is your net worth.
I hate it because it's like, you know, there are people that know everybody in Manchester in the creative scene, but then it's like out of everybody in Manchester, there are maybe only 20 people that would be able to properly help you, like carve out a space within like the sector here and perhaps then expand out of that. And I think actually it's about, rather than doing that, like when I saw some of our artists who were focused on employing those people or bringing those people along in the journey, I was like, actually, the people I can trust are my friends, the people who are around every day, that I'm going to have to get to a point with, if I'm working with this 45-year-old English guy from like the burbs, I'm going to have to like bring him, no disrespect, I'm going to have to bring him up to speed culturally about like what I'm trying to discuss. Where actually with my brethren, we have primarily pretty much similar lived experiences. Yeah. So it's like, well...
And we talk about that. That's our... Sometimes that is the bread and butter of our conversations. How we catch up with each other, even if there's been a lapse in time of communicating, is to check in along that same journey. It's like, system tested me, still here.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's building with people who are your friends and who you know, like, means that there's no explanation. Like, one of the hardest things to do, like bringing it back to homecoming, is articulate what homecoming is. Like, if I had to pitch that now, like in an elevator pitch to somebody, it'd be very hard to do. But because as three black men making this podcast, we have all experienced homecoming and have relationships to places outside of England. We all know what that feeling is to go back to those places. And it's like, it's almost like a culturally unspoken thing. So my thing was building with my friends, because I know that no matter what, we're immediately creating and collaborating from a place of understanding, not explanation.
Yeah, that is a bar. I fully lost my train of thought at the end of that last that last poem. But no, I think for me, that's one of the things that has kept me so connected to like that continuous growth. And it's not necessarily like team house where you all live together and you're like in each other's pockets. It's none of that, because I think that's what I've seen. Yes. Wow. I think that's what I've seen some people do, which is they've essentially tried to make a band and do that whole creating a lifestyle together, because that's also maybe part of the brand, or part of the end piece is like a marketable lifestyle, like a Superman cape that you can buy from Argos. Like some people can, some people. So yeah, maybe like not having that is what for me has defined what can be really autonomous individual people. So like you don't see the 40 rolls of film that I'm constantly picking up and dropping off from developers in town when I'm doing that 10,000 hours. But likewise, I can sit next to you and go, I can tell he's writing something in his head, or you're like typing in your phone as quick as your brain can go. Like, that's your thing. That's not me being like, what words is it? Does that rhyme with this instead? Does it, like, that's not people who are trying to, again, make a band. Where...
So, but just to play devil's advocate, can you see any like positive in like doing everything solo, independent?
No.
I've got one maybe.
I think for those that it worked out for, it's brilliant to sit and say, like, there's lots of people in hip hop who are like, I do everything myself, and that's cool that it's worked out for you. But primarily, there is strength in numbers. We know at the moment, particularly when you look at the landscape of England culturally, we live in a system that doesn't value arts or education. That's why the Tories, are stripping everything out of... I had to censor myself then. Did you see that? Did you see me?
Like, system tried you.
they're like literally stripping arts and creative media out of the education system. So it's like, we already know that there's not a lot of value attached to it in terms of politically. So it's like the hardest thing to do here is make noise if they're taking away recourse to funds, or they're taking away recourse to platforms that are helping you explore your voice. Like, how the hell are you going to go through the process and your 10,000 hours on your own and then build it up to a point where it's going to be a cash generative business on its own? You're not. It's hard to do. So the necessity of having a team has become way more important, particularly in this medium where we're having to document everything through the form of content. There's a really cool MC from America that I'm really inspired by called LaRussell. I've watched him go from being someone that was on the verge of blowing up to being someone that owns his own artistry ecosystem. And he talks about it like the good company, which is his thing, is just all of his friends. Yeah. And then he's employed people to fill in the skill sets that his friends don't have. But they built a venue in his, I think it's his parents' house backyard. That he
back garden.
Charges people to come, but got like a proper performance sound system in. When he goes on tour to keep costs down, he hires local musicians in the city. He puts it out on socials. He's like, I'll pay a violinist X. And then they get to come to soundcheck, they rehearse, and then they tour doing stripped down versions of his songs. So bro, like everything around him is smart and refined, and it's to the point where, like, I think in a recent thing he was saying he's made $1 million, like in one of his bars he dropped that. So mad inspiring. But it's the fact that he's done that with his friends, and it's his friends, you can tell, who are closing those gaps. Like, you look better on this side when you're performing, or you look better when you do this. So like his content's changing. You can see, like, in terms of when he does these reels where he's talking about game and the point of independence, you can see that he's tweaked the way he's saying, and it's becoming more honed into himself. And it's because he's immediately comfortable around the people he's with who are able to be honest. Like, sometimes as an artist, I need to be told when my shit stinks. Yeah. You tell me when my shit stinks.
Yeah, you have to say it.
You'll tell me when something I've written is whack, and you'll be like, nah, you can do better than that or whatever. That happened with Black Flag. I spat you one verse and you're like, that's not it.
Yeah.
I was humbled real quick. You're like, that's
people
not
rapping
it.
here.
Yeah, you need to go harder, and then I came with a better one. But I feel like it's needing those people to be able to do that. Like, when you're on your own and you're writing, like, you think everything you've said is the hardest thing until like.
So you're supposed to do it first. That sometimes that is the first spark. It might not light the whole thing on fire, but sometimes just being able to stubbornly go, I'm good at this thing, even though, again, you might look back at it by the time you get to the end, you're like, what was I saying at the beginning? And like, I'll do it sometimes. By the time I get to the end of a day shooting, and I'll just like clip my camera, put my headphones on and go, I want to capture this in my head. I'll have an idea. And like the first 2 shots are absolute nonsense. And if I'm shooting film, I look back and I'm like, this is absolute nonsense. If I'm on film, I'll press the button and it just doesn't feel satisfying, where you'll say a bar and you'll be like, I might come back to that one later. I might do that. So like, I guess for me, that was probably the one instance of like being independent that I can see as being a benefit. But again, you say it's in a vacuum and it's very rare and it's not consistent. It is a spark of the, like, being able to be the most objective feedback for yourself, because like if you're talking to yourself in your head when you're going over something, you will always humble yourself. You'll gas yourself as well. But most people, and I know my friends are like this, which is one of the reasons we connect as friends and people, is that we can internally go, I can do better than that. And then go, I'll look back and I'll work on it. So yeah, I always think that, like, I assume other people are doing that when they're creative. So if they're on their own and you see them with their hood up doing something, in my head I'm going, they are they're fully invested in that immediate step or bettering that beat that a producer's making that they've been sat there for 4 months over, and like people have only heard snippets here and there and they've been like, no, it's the greatest shit I've ever made. Like, in my head, I like to think that, okay, maybe they are just being the most honest with themselves that they can ever be internally. I'm not saying anything out loud, but again, that producer's going back and he's like, nah, that drum doesn't sound right. Oh no, I need to fix this. Like, and we hear them talking like that about the stuff that they create. So I guess musicians is a good example. But yeah, like for me, with taking pictures, I'll look back, and with those Jamaica pictures, it's the first time ever. Like, one, I printed the pictures like that quality and that size just to be able to see them represented. But I've started to like edit in hindsight, where like then you like musicians, you'll fine tune, you'll do something, and you'll go, actually, even in the studio, in the middle of recording it, being like, actually, I'm just going to switch these little bits around. I literally sat there like, I can darken this area and I can dodge and burn the picture differently. And I was editing in hindsight, so I can then go back to the computer. So if I want it to look a little bit better, I don't do much editing. It's usually just like darken and lighten things to make sure the color matches what blind me was seeing when I took the picture. So yeah, I guess like for me, that's independence, but that happens so rarely. For me, I can't imagine that that's a consistent thing.
I think that autonomy only comes though when that autonomy can only come when you understand the absolute value and opportunity that freedom gives. Like when you've worked in a team before, then you know like, oh yeah, I can go and do these things and lighten and darken and go and do that, and I'm comfortable doing that. But when you're on your own, I think because you've not traded skills or sharpened swords, I guess you have no other reference point.
That's a very good point. Yeah, now everyone build a team. Go build a team.
Like, I'm just thinking, like, back when I didn't work with many people, my music sounded repetitive because it was just me in an echo chamber, recording in a makeshift setup with two producers, one called Matt and then one called Joe. The one's Joe York, reggae singer. He used to live in this commune thing in the back of the Great Western in Hume. He was a dope guy. My very first project, Moment of Silence, he co-produced some of that. But yeah, him, like, we were just echo chambers.
Yeah.
He wasn't really into producing hip-hop at the time. Again, he was more reggae. I was more hip-hop. It's funny going back and looking at that and the synchronicities that exist now as well. That's funny. Pinning that. Yeah. Anyway, I was like just going in there and just wanting to rap the hardest verse that I could and do the most complicated flows that I could. And he was allowing me to do it and recognize that was time that I needed to grow as an artist. But it wasn't until I started inviting other artists there or trying to work with other people that I was like, actually, yeah, there's a stasis. Is that the word where you just stand still?
I'll take it.
Stasis. Word geeks.
If we're wrong, fix it in the comments.
Fix it in the comments. But yeah, when you're just not moving and it's because, I can't move because there's nothing else to propel me, no ideas or no external innovation. And I think like if you stop and you see that artists that at every scale that talk about like, I want to stay on my own and do everything on my own, you can see that they either then become monocultural in the sense of their output of what they do, or they just fade into obscurity because having those different people, it exposes you to just different perspectives.
And I guess it's probably the kryptonite of it is we've seen people who've gone the extreme and to be violently independent. So they're like aggressively independent. They're trying to burn down anything that looks like teams or resemblance, or even ostracizing their own historic teams to be violently independent. And I guess, that gets to the point where even as cultures where like they're doing too much over there, or they're screaming too much about their own individuality to understand that they got there off the physical hours and investment of other people's 10,000 hours. Like many checks and deposits were made and withdrawn to get, I guess, some of those individuals to that stage where they can tell everyone that on the team, I'm doing this solo and I'm doing all of this. But yeah, I guess that's an extreme of it because...
Thanks for watching 1000 Fan Podcast. If you've liked anything that you've heard and you want to watch more, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the thing. We can only do this if you guys engage. Let us know what you think. Let's chop it up in the comments, and together we can find out how we can all build our 1,000 fans and hopefully all get rich.